We came up with a draw from the south in the spring of '54, and Josh was the one who wanted to stop. Nothing about that country looked good to me, but I was not the one talking to him who was calling the shots. Don't get the idea that it was not pretty country, because it surely was. There was plenty of water, grass, trees. That spring offered some of the coldest and best water I ever tasted. I didn't like the look of the country around. There was just too much Indian sign. Forget it, Pike, Josh Boone said irritably. For a kid, you sound more like an old woman all the time. Believe me, I know gold country and this is it. Why should a man go all the way to California with his gold all around him? It may be here, Kenyon grumbled, but maybe Pike Downey ain't so dumb, even if he is a kid. He's dead right about the Indian side. If we'd stick around here, there being no more than 5 of us, we're out to get our hair lifted. Kenyon was the only one who thought as I did. The others had gold fever and had it bad, but Kenyon's opinions didn't make me feel any better, because he knew more about Indians than any of the rest of us. I'd rather have been wrong and safe. Josh Boone didn't know gold country. He had been in California when the first strike was made, but I don't mean the one at Sutter's Mill that started all the fuss. I mean the first strike, which was down in the canyon near Los Angeles. Josh had done all right down there, and when the first big strike came from up north, and he cleaned up some $40,000, and he rode back east and had himself a time. Why keep it? He laughed. There's more where that came from. Maybe there was, but if I made myself a packet like that, I plan to buy myself a farm and settle down. I even had the place in mind. It was Boone who suggested we ride north away from the trail. There's mountains yonder, he said, and I mind there's gold. Why ride all the way to California when you might find it right here? Me, I was ready. Nobody would ever say Pike Downey was slow to look at new country. The horse I rode was best in the country, and it could walk faster than most horses could trot. It weighed about 1,400, and most of it was muscle. It was all horse, that black was, so when we turned off to the hills, I wasn't worried. That came later. Josh Boone was our leader, much as we had one. Then there was Jim Kenyon, German Kruger, and Ed Karp. I was the kid of the bunch, just turned 19, strong as a young bull. Josh had been against me coming along, but Kenyon spoke for me. He's the best shot I ever did see, he told him, and he could track a snake upstream in muddy water that boy would to take along. Kenyon calling me a boy kind of grated. I've been man enough to hold my own and do my part since I was 14. My pa and Ma had come west from Virginia in a covered wagon, and I was born in that wagon. I've been hunting ever since I was knee-high to a short beaver. And the first time I drove a wagon over the Santa Fe Trail, I was just past 14. My rifle drew me from a Comanche's attack on the wagon train, and we had 3 more fights before that we came up to Santa Fe. Santa Fe was wild and rough, and I had a mix-up with the Comanchero in Santa Fe with knives, and I put him down to stay. The following year, I went on the trail again, and then I went to hunting buffalo in Texas. The year after that, I went all the way to California, and returning from that trip, I got friendly with some Cheyennes and spent most of the year with them, raiding deep into Mexico. By the time I met Ed Boone, I had 5 years of the roughest kind of living it behind me. Boone talked himself mighty big, but wasn't bigger than me, neither was Ed Carp. We rode up that draw and found ourselves the prettiest little canyon you'll ever see, and we camped there among the trees. We killed us a deer, and right away Josh went to panning that stream. He found gold from the first pan. Gold. They ran heavy from the first pan, and then after that there was no talking to them. We got to work, but being a loner, I went along the stream, upstream by myself. Panning for gold was something I had never done. But all the way back from California, at that time I traveled with one of the best. And he filled me to the ears with what was needed to know about placer mining for gold. He told me about trying sandbars and little beaches where the stream curves around and throws up sand in the crook of the elbow. Well, I found such a place. And she showed color. Wasting no more time on panning, I got my shovel and started digging it down to the bedrock. No more than 4 feet down, I struck it. It was cracked here and there, and remembering what the old-timer had told me, I cleaned those cracks and went back under the thin layers of rock and panned out what I found. By nightfall, I had a rawhide sack with maybe $300 or $400 in it. All of the boys had gold, but none of them had as much as I showed them, which was less than half of what I had. Jim Kenyon was tickled, but it didn't set too well with either Boone or Carp. Neither of them liked to be bested, and in particular, they didn't like it from me. Kruger pat me on the back. "Gut, boy," he said. "Dat is gut." We took turns hunting meat, and the next day it fell to me. Mounting up, I took my sharp breech loader and I bucked on my spare pistol. I had me 2 Army Colts, model 1848, and I set store by them guns. I picked them off a dead Texan down east of Santa Fe. That Texas man had run up on some horse thieves and out of luck at the same time. There had been 4 horse thieves and him, and they had at it. And then when I came along some hours later, then they all lay. All good dead men with a horse for each and 6 extra. There were their rifles, pistols, and a good bit of grub, but there was no sense in leaving it for the Comanches to pick up or the sand to bury. In the time I've been packing for these 6 shooters, I'd become right handy with them. They were riding my belt that morning when I rode out to camp. Sighting a couple deer close to camp, I rode around them. I had no mind to do my killing close by, or we might need the game for some later time. A few miles further down, I fetched me a good-sized buck, skinned him out, and cut me some meat. Down at the stream, I was washing the blood from my hands when I glanced up to see 2 things at once. Only one was important at the moment. The first thing I spotted was a full-grown Injun with his bow all back and an arrow at me. Throwing myself to one side, I fetched one of those Colts and triggered me an Injun just as the arrows flicked past my face. He slid down over that riverbank and right into the happy hunting grounds, where no doubt someday we'll meet and swap yarns. The other thing I glanced upstream just a ways. It was only a glimpse, but I edged up along the creek for a better look. Under a ledge of rock just above the water was a hole. It was about crawling into size and didn't smell of animals, so I crawled in and stood up. It was a big cave, a room maybe 20 feet long by 15 wide, with a solid packed sandy floor and a smidgen of light from above. Looking up, I could see a tangle of brushes over a hole, which was a couple of feet across but well hidden by brush. When I rode into camp and unloaded my meat, I told the boys about my engine. I can't the bank over him, I said, but they will most likely find him. Then they will come hunting us. One more and one less, Carp said. That engine is a good engine. A dead engine is to start trouble, I said. We better light out of here if we want to keep our hair. Are you crazy? Boone stared at me. With all the gold we're finding? We don't need to leave the country, I protested. But what does gold mean to a dead man? The boy's right, Kenyon had agreed. We're in for trouble. We can handle trouble, Carp said. I ain't afeard of no Indians. Anyway, this just sounds like Pike talking big. I bet he never saw no Injun. Well, I put down the meat and I was eating and licked my fingers, so I got up and looked across the fire at him. You called me a liar, Ed, I said mildly. I take that from no man. He stared at me like he couldn't believe what he was hearing. Now, what about this, he said. The boy figures he's a grown-up man. Well, I'll take that out of him. He got to his feet. No guns, Boone said. If they're Injuns, we don't want to draw them nigh. Me, I shucked my bowie. Some folks don't like fancy cold steel, and Ed Carp seemed to be one of them. Shuck or steel, Ed, I told him. I'll see the color of your insides. No knives, he protested. I fight with my hands or a gun. I flipped my knife hard on a log. All right, I said. It makes me no mind. You just come on. We'll see who's the boy of this outfit. You come with me. Ed Carp was a big man, all raw bone and iron hard. He fetched me a clout on the jaw that made me see lights flashing, hit me so hard I nearly staggered. Then he swung his other fist, and I stepped aside, grabbing him by the shirt front and crotch, swinging him aloft and heaving him against the bank. He hit hard, but he was game and came up swinging. He fetched me a blow, but I was scared of me grabbing him and hit me while I was going away. I made as if to step on a loose rock and stagger, and he leapt at me. Dropping to one knee, I caught him again by the shirt front and crotch. Only this time, I threw him head first into the bank. He hit hard and just laid there. When I saw I wasn't about to get up, I dusted off my knees and went back to the bone I'd been picking. Nobody said anything, but Josh Boone was looking surprised and sized me up like he hadn't really seen me before. You can fight some, he admitted. That didn't take you no time at all. One time at Pierre's Hole, I fought nigh on 2 hours with a big trapper. He'd have made two of Ed there and was skookum, man. But I whopped him some. After a bit, Ed Carp come around and he come back to the fire, shaking his head and blinking, but nobody paid him no mind. Me, I was right sorry. I ain't good for folks to start fighting amongst them in Injun country. Come daylight, I went back to my shaft and taken one look. Whilst I've been grub hunting yesterday, somebody moved in and cleaned the bedrock sliced as a piano top. Slick as a piano top. Sure, I was upset, but I said nothing at all right then. I went on up to the creek to the better place and dug me another hole. Only when I left this one, I covered it with brush and wiped out the sign I left. Kenyon had been hunting all day, and when he came back, he was worried. We better light out or we're fixed for a fight. There's Indians all around us. They listened to Kenyon when they hadn't listened to me, so we dug up ourselves some rifle pits and forded up with logs. I said nothing about my shaft being cleaned out. Next day I went back to my brush-covered hole and sank her down to bedrock and cleaned up. This was heavy with gold and the best so far. My method of going to the rock was paying off. It was more work than using a pan, but it was more dangerous. That night when we all came into camp, Cougar was missing. We looked at one another, and believe me, we didn't feel good about it. Nobody had seen the German, nobody had heard a shot. When morning came, I headed upstream and doubled back to where Kenyon was working. Only I stayed back in the brush. I laid right down in the brush not far from him, but where I could watch both banks at once. Jim, I kept my voice, only he could hear me. Don't you look up or act different. I'll do the talking. All right, he said. Somebody robbed that shaft of mine. Cleaned her out while I was hunting. He wiped sweat from his face but said nothing. I have some ideas about the German Kruger, too. You think he stole your gold and lit out? You know better. Nor do I think Indians killed him. However, we better have us a look. Who do you think? It wasn't you, it wasn't me. And I bet every ounce I have it wasn't that old German. Pausing, I said, you go on working, I'll watch. He was canny, Jim was. He worked all right, but he didn't get into pattern. When he bent down, he didn't lift up in the same place, but away from there. He kept up from any pattern, so if anybody planned a shot, they'd have to wait until he was out in the open.